How you doing, Mr. Van Ryder?
I am doing quite well, Mr. Farnham. How are you?
Good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited about episode 29 of the HOU.SEC
Episode
cast.
29. Yeah, it's going to be good. This is a good one.
Yep. Episode 29 of the HOU.SEC cast, the HOU.SEC.CON podcast. We have got Mr. Jason Haddix, who is CEO hacker trainer at Arcanum Information Security. Old friend of mine, did a great talk at HOU.SEC.CON this year, and we're going to get talking about that. So I'd say let's just jump right into it.
Let's go talk to him.
Hey, Sam.
Hey, Michael. What's going on?
Oh, just another what I see the other day. The old default when you're I am having a good day, but when you're not having a good day, the old default is living the dream. Living the dream.
I don't think I want to hear that anymore. I think it's been overused.
I think it's security. I think it's security as long as you're not having a bad day, right? I think it's a good day.
Yeah. Well, Jason, that's why I got out of operational duty, because I got tired of having bad days. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Well, since you spoke up, Jason, I guess I can introduce you to the rest of the world here. Jason Haddix, good old friend, used to work together over at HP Fortify On Demand back in the day. And you spoke at HOU.SEC.CON, and now you are with us as CEO hacker trainer at Arcanum Information Security. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you. I was really enjoyed your talk at the conference. I think a lot of people did. There was some chatter about some cool stuff that we'll talk about later in there. But really happy to have you on here. I think I knew you before you were you, right? I mean, you were well known, but man, you've blown up in the last few years after Ubisoft and everything else, right? So
yeah, I think that role at Ubisoft really put me on the map, I think, and I've done a lot of content since HP. So just stuff like you guys do, podcasts and training and stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, cool to have you here. Before we get into all things Jason, as usual, we have our HOU.SEC.CON segment and all that. So Sam and I'll go through that. But no, seriously, really happy to have you on here. All right. So HOU.SEC.CON updates.
Well, we have HOU.SEC.CON or OT.SEC.CON, meaning operational technology, my passion, right? So we have that coming up on April 17th at the Norris Conference Center, and should have we'll be doing a call for presenters here in January for that, as well as we'll be curating some of that content. But again, it's meant for folks in cyber that have OT environments, and then those we're really trying to bring the folks from the plants and such into the room to also get up to speed on the cyber elements and get everybody talking and on the same page. So really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, that one's going to be good. Second year is a standalone. I mean, we've done the OT track and everything, but second year is a standalone. I'm very excited. Doing 2 tracks, I think, this year. So,
and we have another one coming up. Which one? What other one do we have coming up?
We've got HOU.SEC.CON. HOU.SEC.CON. That's the week after HOT.SEC.CON. So April 22nd over at the Marriott Marquis, which is our old stomping grounds from where we've done HOU.SEC.CON for a few years until we moved it. So all of the websites for both of those, by the way, are going to be coming up at the end of this year. So look for tickets and all that. All the details will be coming out, but we just want to make sure, get it on everybody's radar. HOU.SEC.CON, obviously, just like it sounds, not necessarily just executives, but anybody who wants to be a leader in security or is a leader in security. We do curate that a little bit so we don't get a bunch of people trying to sell to them, because that crowd is where everybody that's who they want to be talking to. But so yeah, that's coming out April 22nd. And then what else is going on with HOU.SEC.CON, Sam?
Well, we've got the dates, right? The September 30th and October 1st. So that's just rolls off the tongue beautifully, right? So, and be back at the George R. Brown Convention Center, and we're going to be a little bit bigger this year. So, much more going on with that. And so all that stuff will be, to your point, releasing more data by the end of the year on tickets and sponsorship. Sponsorship prospectuses are up for all of them right now. So if you're interested in supporting the community, that's great. And of course, the one from last year, all the talks are up on Vimeo and YouTube, and there's a link there in the show notes. So, all this great content. I think there were some 70 sessions that were recorded and released. So really excited to be able to share that with the community, and hopefully folks get some really good use out of that.
Yep, I hope they do too, and hopefully YouTube doesn't decide to take our channel down again, which was really weird. Yeah, Jason, I don't know if you saw that, but it literally lasted like all of an hour or two or something. But Lauren sent an appeal in really quickly. But I went up there and I was like, wait a minute, it just says your channel has been taken. I was like, whoa, but it came back within a couple hours.
Picked up the word hacker somewhere and then got all freaked out, right?
It was probably Jason's presentation, I would imagine. So those just too hacky
copyright infringement.
It's so funny, the content moderation on all the platforms and stuff. It's sometimes that automated stuff. I did a couple AI bots that were security-based bots, but because in the prompting that I made these AI bots, I mentioned, I think, ethical hacking. They got removed temporarily from the OpenAI ecosystem, and then I had to appeal just like you guys, which was crazy. So
yeah, well, I was like, no, we've got so much content on here. So well, anyway, all right, well, that's all the updates. Let's get into the news segment. So had a kind of an interesting reason I brought this one up. So on the hacker news, which is literally what we're looking for, hacker news, cyber criminals are using Webflow to deceive users into sharing sensitive login credentials. So if you don't know what Webflow is, when we were offline talking about the content, Jason said it very succinctly. It's kind of the new, what'd you call it? New WordPress. Yeah, the new WordPress, and really easy to get set up on on Webflow like it was on WordPress back in the day. So what's happening is you're seeing a lot of phishing pages created using the website builder. And one of the things I found interesting is the ability to just create subdomains really quickly on there too, without having to go through, which, I mean, you can do that anywhere, but just the ability to do it really, really quickly and fool people into moving along in some of these standalone phishing pages, and just get in there and do it really quick, redirect them. A lot of that stuff you can just build so fast. And kind of the reason I brought it up and why it appealed to me is because of what we're going to be talking about in your segment, Jason, whereas it's just not that difficult to get this set up and get it done really, really quickly. And they're using like Cloudflare R2 and Microsoft Sway and there's a bunch of other tools, and just auto generate all of these subdomains really quickly. It's like what you used to see with DNS entries, but they were primary domains, but you would get all those really weird characters and all of that. Now they're just doing it with subdomains. So you can do it a lot quicker, and you don't have to go through any kind of approval process in DNS. You just get the subdomains done really, really quickly. So not anything massively sophisticated, but thought it was interesting, and just one more tool that all these attackers have to be able to get us to go click on something we ain't supposed to click on. So,
it's interesting with this article when I was looking at it, right? Because the first thing that they're trying to do, or like the adversaries are trying to do right now, is attack crypto sites, right? Like clones of MetaMask and Coinbase and stuff like that. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think some of the great things about this is the subdomains that you can generate off of Webflow. I mean, great or bad, depending on what your perspective is, but is when you create a subdomain for a Webflow hosted page, you inherit their site score from Webflow, right? And so if you're trying to phish or capture credentials or forward any information out of that domain using email services, you are automatically trusted, especially if you put Cloudflare on top of it. A lot of red teamers I know use services like this to make sure that they don't get sinkholed by an email protection product. And so that's one of the easy things. And then I also think that they just get a little bit better of a pass being called Webflow, because how many times have you seen it, like the word flow in the URL bar somewhere as part of like an e-commerce shop or something like that? So if you put like metamask.webflow.io, right, like someone might just look at that and be like, oh, that's part of like some kind of e-commerce URL or something like that. So they get a little bit of additional thing there, and it's really easy. You can control whatever you name the subdomain on this service. So attackers will do this all day long. If they can find something that can trick somebody And these sites are so easy to clone nowadays, right? Like you can put a whole website's JavaScript and CSS into AI and clone it completely with your own JavaScript code to capture credentials. You can do it in like 10 minutes in most cases these days. So this is only going to get worse as we go along, unfortunately.
Well, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sam.
No, I was just going to say this whole thing it makes my blood pressure rise because we a local so close to me had somebody within, I'll say, my family circle that got scammed, and this was part of it, right? And so the it's just frustrating because there's a lot of people that don't know, and the more and more that they make it look more authentic, the more and more folks are going to get hurt. And it's really frustrating when you hear the stories of folks that don't have the means and are getting hit with stuff like this. And so it's just really, while I'm not as technically in depth as you guys on this thing, it just really pisses me off, when I see it seems like it's growing and getting worse rather than getting better. Right. And that's the thing that bothers me.
Well, I'd say on this one, like, you're right as an overall, like in this use case specifically, probably some of the people that you're worried about getting scammed by these things aren't using cryptocurrency most likely. But to Jason's point, it's so easy. Like back in the day when, you were primarily just using HTML code, and it was really easy to just go view source and be able to clone something really, really quickly. Mm-hmm. And things kept getting more sophisticated. And I was like, man, it's getting really hard to clone a site, and like with like really good speed. You could clone front pages and things like that, but all the dynamic content. But to Jason's point, now with AI doing it, it's like it just picks it up and does it for you and creates it that quickly. And you can just create those automations, have it go push out to Webflow. I mean, and then you got even hyper automation. Some of the hyper automation tools out there are available. They have free versions of those things. You can grab tines and stuff like that and have it do pieces of this for you. So,
well, wait. I thought we were supposed to put rails on AI. I thought AI wasn't going to be a thing for the bad guys. I thought we had all this taken care of.
I mean, it's a freight train for everybody, right? I mean, I think that blue teamers are going to gain from it, and I think bad guys are going to gain from it. I think I think everybody in the industry is going to gain from it in some way, shape, or form. But I mean, I have friends who are developing websites. This is just in regular, like, not InfoSec, right? This is just like friends who've never been able to code a website before can now go into ChatGPT and build their own website, which is amazing for the world, but also kind of scary in this use case that we're talking about. So.
It's not even, that's like, I remember doing a talk and a session during, I think it was right when COVID kind of started breaking back and everybody was starting to go back to normal. But I talked about how a lot of that brought about the whole citizen developer movement. And because you had all these tools, you're able to click and drag. You don't even need that anymore.
Yeah, no code is a huge movement.
Yeah, that was low code. They called it no code, low code back then.
Yeah.
Now this is true. Like you just go, this is what I want. If you know how to do a good prompt engineering, and those prompts are all over the place now. You can just go grab them and say, this is what I want to do.
The one thing I thought was also interesting about this is they were the researchers who were looking into this specific kind of spoofing. They were saying that these days, a lot of the criminals, in addition to Cloudflare, are also like using the free trials from the anti-bot companies, and they're using libraries and stuff that block bots, because those also block security scanners and security like scoring technology. And so they'll implement those in these Webflow pages so that they can't even get a bad score because they're blocking the bots that will spider and do some of this stuff. So it's really interesting that some of the tools that we're using in day-to-day to protect ourselves are also being used to protect kind of this malware page, just drive-by malware, probably cred capture attack.
That's so nuts, dude.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now that we depressed everybody and the world's on flames, we're just going to sit back and say, this is fine. And we're going to talk to Jason. Actually, let everybody take a breath. We're going to take a break. Everybody on the other side of this break, we will get into talking about Jason. Drink your drink of choice to make yourself feel better after that news segment. So we'll see you on the other side of the break. And we are back. Hopefully everybody is undepressed now and we can talk some cool stuff. I don't know that Jason's talk is going to make you feel any better if you go watch. It's good though. It's very entertaining. But you know, Jason's not here to make everybody feel good. He wants to make everybody aware of what's going on. Isn't that right, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think the second half of my talk has a lot of defensive tips.
It does. Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully it's useful.
Well, I have had my aunt look at some of my posts, and I don't think she looks at this, but she was like, when I put the one with Spaff and his keynote, she was like, that was very depressing, but it was only the intro part. I was like, go watch the whole thing, Aunt Tracy. Yeah. Watch the whole thing. And she felt better at the end. So.
Okay. All right, good.
All right. Well, before we get to talking about your talk, which by the way is called Tales from the Breach, we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. First thing we're going to do is talk about you. So I mentioned it earlier. You and I have been friends for a while, known each other since when I still remember the picture came up on Facebook, that first picture that we all took when at HOU.SEC.CON.
Yeah.
Where you and me and David Nestor and a few other folks. I think it was my first day.
Yeah,
it was Dan Miesler, and Greg Patton.
And there was one of the more like sales engineering guys, I think, was there too.
Yeah,
I can't remember. Yeah,
it was a great pick. It was a great pick.
Sure.
And it was technically my first day at Fortify on Demand, HP Fortify on Demand.
That's funny. I didn't know that. Yep. Like I could have sworn you had worked there for years.
No, I just started working, and David Nestor was my boss. Sorry, guys, for all the history. We go way back, but so yeah, I think that was back in 2014 or something like that. I think is when I started working over there. So I've known each other a while, but I obviously didn't know you before that. So kind of wanted to get, like we do with a lot of our guests or all of our guests, we want to get a sense of what got you in the industry, what inspired you, that kind of stuff. Give us the lowdown.
Yeah. So when I was young, kind of getting out of high school, going into early college, I was doing community college in Southern California, and so I was taking CCNA classes, that track at the City College, getting my networking associates, and was doing great in there. But all my friends were older than me. They were all 21 already, and I was still 20 at this point. And so they were going out to the bars and having a good time, and I wanted to go with them. So my origin story is actually I went to a friend of a friend and said, hey, can you find me a fake ID? And he was like, yeah, of course, we can figure this out. And so I ordered one. And back then it was a monumental amount of money for a college student. So like $150 or something like that. That's a lot of ramen, And so, and so I got it, and then quickly realized that it was like the quality was not very good on this fake ID. It was really bad. And with anything like that in my life, especially computers and stuff like that, I was like, maybe I can do this better myself. And so I fell into, back then it wasn't the dark web yet. It was a forum ecosystem, but it wasn't on Tor. And I fell into a couple of forums where I learned how to make fake IDs. And so in that ecosystem of the fake ID making and the carding is people who print credit cards, people who print fake IDs, and people who hack the websites to get the credit card numbers to put on the fake credit cards. So it's an ecosystem of those people in the forums, and then the actual people who cash out at stores and stuff like that. And to a great extent, this is still how it works today for credit card fraud. And so I learned how to do all this stuff on there, and I learned how to make fake IDs, and I kind of learned a little bit of web hacking from those people. And then the forum I was part of is called Shadow Crew. It got taken down by the FBI and the Secret Service. It was one of the first big raids on forums that had happened. And so like everyone who I had been learning like some stuff from basically arrested, law enforcement agencies across the globe came down on him. And so it kind of scared me straight. I mean, I took all my printers. I had only made like 5 IDs or something like that. And I hadn't even sold any yet. So it wasn't like, I was on anyone's list. I was just lurking basically and learning. But I had gotten like decently good. at printing them just for myself. And so when it happened, I put everything in trash bags and went out and disposed of all my printers and stuff. And then I went back to my professor, and I told him like a version of the story, and he was like, there's this thing called penetration testing, right, where you can do the hacking part and you can get paid for it. And this was before like I really had been educated. And he's like, yeah, you can be an ethical hacker, and we have an elective program that you can take and learn some of it. And then like it's really an emerging field right now. And so that was my journey. He kind of helped me, learn. And then the thing was there was not a lot of content back then to teach you penetration testing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had to teach myself and piece it together and build a methodology that worked for me. And I started doing like free pen tests not free. I worked at a place doing IT, and I would just go to the security group. There's like one security guy and an IT person. And I would go there and just give them web bugs and be like, hey, I found cross-site scripting. And they'd be like, what's cross-site scripting? Because they were network guys.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, let me show you. Like I can control the web page if you click on this link, and I can like steal passwords from you. Anyway, so got moved to the IT team, not even security, the IT team that was closer to security. And then I left there and had my first job at a small company called Redspin as a junior pen tester. And so that was a great 3 years. Worked with people now who like lead this industry at some really big companies. It was so crazy that such a small little company in like Carpinteria, California, it was like people from there went on to do great things. And then at the end, I met Daniel Miesler, who's a mutual friend of ours. So I met Dan doing a CTF at Black Hat. And I went into this class, and we were doing the CTF, and it was based around the book, The Web Application Hacker's Handbook. And, so I was looking around in the room, and I was like, you had to have a partner for this CTF. And I was looking at everybody's books, and Dan's book was just creased to hell, like on the spine, right? So that, he had been opening this thing a ton. And so Dan and I teamed up. We didn't know each other before that. And we got second place in the CTF, which was cool. And then afterwards, he's like, hey, do you want to come work for HP? And I was like, eventually after talking with him for a while, I was like, yeah. So came to work on the HP team with, eventually the HP team, professional service team, merged with Fortify when they acquired Fortify. We built out a subdivision that was kind of a no-no, but that's a fine. We built out Shadow Labs, which was the testing arm. HP Shadow Labs. And then we had the Fortify On Demand assessment team, as well as static code analysis. Mm-hmm. And so we were rocking. I mean, those were some really good days, right? That team was excellent. We had a great, I think, 5-year run, I think, or 6-year run, I think. I was there, and then I left there to go to Bug Crowd, which is a bug bounty platform. So HP
built out some really good stuff at Bug Crowd, by the way.
I did.
Bug Crowd U was fantastic.
Man. Thank you. Yeah,
I'm not lying. That's fantastic.
I mean, so during the nights of eventually at HP, right, I was shooting for director of penetration testing, because that was the same title Dan Kaminsky had at the time, and he was my idol in the industry at IO Active. And so
may he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace. Yeah. And so eventually I attained that title at HP, which was cool. But then I couldn't shake the technical bug, right? Like I couldn't stop hacking, even though I was the boss of teams at that point. Mm-hmm. And so I was doing Bug Crowd Bug Bounty at night. And I remember being part of the first Bug Bounty that Bug Crowd did, getting an email. It wasn't even a platform at that point. They would just send you an email and be like, do you want to hack this site? And we'll pay you money if you find security bugs. So I did that. And that's actually what got me really into Bug Bounty, was actually participating in it. I was number 1 on the Bug Crowd platform for 2 years running in their first couple years, and then ended up to go work for them.
Casey was like, "Who is this guy?"
He was, yeah. I mean, the thing was with Bug Bounty, right? I mean, if you were a hacker of any sort, ethical hacker of any sort, you didn't really know how good you were compared to other people. There was no litmus test. There's only one certification, right? Or there's two. I mean, it was either the G-Pen from SANS, or it was offensive security. And, I had both of those. So it was like, but I wanted to see, like, against other pen testers from other parts of the world and from other companies, if it was, if I was any good. Turned out I was okay. and then went to
Okay.
work for them. Yeah.
You're nice and humble. Nice and humble.
And so, yeah, Bug Crowd, we did a whole bunch of stuff. We educated hackers on methodology. We did the triage team. So I think in 1 year that I was there as the head of the triage team, we triaged 16,000 web bugs on my team, which was crazy. It was like drinking from a fire hose. And then left Bug Crowd because my other passion is gaming, and I went to Ubisoft, and I tried my hand at like big CISO role, right? So the head of security and then CISO at Ubisoft, which if you don't know what Ubisoft is, a game company. They make Just Dance, they make Assassin's Creed, The Division, the new Star Wars game that just came out, all that stuff. And so I was head of security there for 3.5 years and CISO there, and got to design a security program, work with some really good professionals, got exposed to a lot of game hacking stuff, and learned a lot about leadership. And then left there, had a quick stint at a buddy's company, but then started my own company, Arcanum, which I do training, 50% training at my place and 50% consulting. So pen test, red team, stuff like that. And then our training is right now AI and offensive security. So
full disclosure, he is not sponsoring this episode. Though he was a sponsor at HOU.SEC.CON.
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
remember,
that's great history.
I remember the last HOU.SEC.CON I went to was in that Marriott, and so when I came to this HOU.SEC.CON, I was like floored by how big it is now. I mean, you guys are really like the black hat like incumbent right now. I mean, you're going to take it over like pretty soon. Like it's crazy.
That may or may not be our goal. I don't know.
those are lofty aspirations right there. So.
Right. Yeah. But it had that vibe, right? It had like, I mean, Black House had to fight back from some branding a little bit about being too businessy, but the size scale, it was huge. It was awesome. And I saw so many people I knew too who came to it to both speak and just attend. It was awesome.
I told Sam, I said I had one of the best moments when there were 4 of my buddies that I'd met through RSA and Black Hat and everything else, and they took a picture on the streets of Houston with me and put it on social media. I was like, wait a minute, they're at our conference in Houston. I didn't have to go to Black Hat.
That's got to be an
amazing
It
was a cool experience.
That's a great experience.
It was a great experience. It really was. Well, thanks for that rundown. And fact check me here. Didn't you and Daniel do the OWASP top 10 on video games?
So we did a project on it. It was called the Game Security Guide, which has fallen into disrepair. We're actually thinking of relaunching it. But for video games, what we did is, like every time there's a big cheat or hack, eventually once it reaches critical mass, it gets a press article or someone writes about it on Wired or something like that. So what we did is we went and basically created a taxonomy of all the different types of hacks that could happen to different types of games, shooters, MOBAs, real-time strategy, all that kind of stuff. And then we tried to break it down to its technical root cause. So to do some root cause analysis on, and then also for each one of those, talk about what the fix is. Is it like an easy fix? Is it an architecture fix? Is it, moving something from the client side to the server side? Because many AAA game studios and even quadruple A game studios, they have that institutional knowledge and they've already built security teams and anti-cheat and all that kind of stuff. But indie games and new game developers don't have any of that knowledge. They don't really get any exposure to security. So we wanted to build a resource for them. So we did that project at OWASP. And then Dan and I, we were with you at Fortify. We did the mobile top 10 as well. The first version of the mobile top 10. But that's
probably one I meant. Yeah, I remember you doing the mobile top 10, but I remember you also doing something on the video games. So
I mean, I remember creating the graphic for the mobile top 10, the hierarchy of where the bugs exist in the ecosystem. That graphic's still used by the project today. I made that on my HP laptops.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, I remember doing a lot of mobile testing there. So
yeah.
Well, so speaking of Ubisoft, because you were there, and when you went there, I was like, I need to go visit Jason, because I'm a big Assassin's Creed guy and video game guy myself. I'm in Sucker Punch Ghost of Tsushima right now, back in it for like the 3rd time. Yeah, I love that game.
Yeah.
Sam's like, we're a bunch of geeks over here. Yeah.
I play Lego Star Wars, just saying.
So that's a fantastic
The Lego games are fantastic. They are great.
I love those games.
Yeah.
Yep.
I originally bought it for my kids, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
just talking to my kids about that the other day, playing that back in the day. So,
Yeah.
well, when you were there, you experienced some bad stuff by a little group that you talked about in your talk. So why don't you give us, and for you that don't know it, again, this is out on the on our YouTube channel and Vimeo. It's called Tales from the Breach. Fantastic talk. He was on the main stage, so he had the cool backdrop and everything behind him. Yeah. So once you run through what you ran into with some of those groups, and again, why I brought it up is why I brought up the article is just kind of the connection between some of these not being ultra difficult and some of the people that were doing these breaches, taking advantage of that. Some of that stuff were young. I mean, you called them kids multiple times in there. So why don't you run through your talk for us?
Yeah. So in the space of 21 through 22, there were a couple threat actor groups that I ran into or colleagues ran into. And so I did this talk called Tales from the Breach, which was not all my experience. It was kind of a collective of a survey I did of a whole bunch of CISOs. But one of the ones a lot of my friends ran into was the same threat actor that we ran into at Ubisoft, which was LAPSUS. And so LAPSUS, is the same group of kids from, there was a couple of them who were American, many of them in UK, and a lot of them in Brazil. And they were young kids, but they were very technically literate in DevOps architecture. And so, they hacked Okta, they hacked Vodafone, NVIDIA, they hacked Samsung, Microsoft, T-Mobile. But they were kind of opportunists. They would go after big companies who, they had a lot of attack surface and stuff like that. And so the talk is like all of the methods that they used, both pulled from survey data, my experience, and any press releases or post blog articles about what happened. And so, in the talk that I gave at HOU.SEC.CON was, basically these kids targeted credentials, like most modern adversaries do. And I talk about, how that's the first stop really for an adversary these days, right? Like they don't want to waste time doing a technical hack if they can already buy access to one of your machines, right? And so they'll go on the dark web and look in different places. But they're not only looking for credentials, they're also looking for cookies, right? And so wholesale nowadays, in Stealer logs, you can buy both credentials and cookie packs together, and they're really cheap. They're anywhere from $10 to $50 for a giant pack. And so they'll go on to the marketplaces and buy these credentials. And so many of the initial access methods that they used against the companies that I mentioned, came from that. They would use credentials. If the credentials didn't work and they got blocked by two-factor authentication, they would use the cookies because the cookies bypass two-factor authentication. They would get stymied there. They would move on to other things like message bombing the person for two-factor authentication, or 2FA bombing, basically. So if you just spam a login request enough times, if you're an attacker and the victim just sees that pop up so many times, they're likely are prone to click it to just get it out of the way. Other times they use vishing. So that was the case of Uber, right? They called a user when they were 2FA bombing them and were like, hey, we're IT. Can you click the button? We're doing an integration. Or I think they said they were the security group, actually. And so someone did. And so they usually targeted authentication systems to try to get access to the VPN to get into a lot of these organizations. But they also targeted Slack a lot too. They were trying to get Slack cookies because they found if they could get someone with some privilege in Slack, then they could root around in all DMs and attachments to find other credentials that might get them into the VPN. Other things they targeted were GitHub organizations, the Office 365 ecosystem, which includes like SharePoint and stuff like that, for the same thing. They were trying to collect a lot of credentials and then figure out a path using what they found to get into the internal network. And so that's the first part of kind of the whole presentation, is all their methods that they use to do that. And then the second part of the presentation, or the second stage of the initial access for modern threat actors, is like when I was doing pen testing, for a long time, and I still do red teaming and pen testing today, there's a very standard methodology for pen testers and red teamers this day that has a lot to do with Active Directory hacking, or configuration issues, or man in the middle. And that's how a lot of pen testers succeed. This version of a threat actor didn't do any of that. They basically, once they were in to the VPN, they again gathered credentials from DevOps hardware or for DevOps from DevOps websites. And those are things, the things that they targeted the most were like CMDB, SharePoint, Jira, Confluence, GitLab, Artifactory, stuff like that. And when you look at those systems, they're all hosted via a web page, right? So for your SOC, when they're looking at traffic and trying to detect anomalies, this all looks like HTTPS traffic, right? I mean, it just looks like a user trying to access Jira or Confluence. So they would go to these places and try to find weak authentication or public pages or whatever, and gather more and more credentials until they found a path where they could achieve their goal. And then all at once, they would strike within a couple minutes. And a lot of times they would ransomware an organization. Other times they would go after the organization's infrastructure to bring it down. And so that's kind of how a couple of these modern threat actors are pivoting from the normal stuff that we see these days.
New direction. Yep. And all of those things have massive amount of data on them. Just a massive amount.
But now that the depressing part is over, right? Maybe you can talk a little bit about, hey, how do we fix these things? What are things that we can do to protect?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things that you have to have nowadays as part of a security organization is a secrets management program as part of your like table stakes for a security program. And a secrets management program, first of all, you don't want to be pasting these passwords everywhere. You don't want to have a system where you're pasting them in Slack to each other. You don't want API keys hosted in source code. You don't want basically Windows credentials hard-coded anywhere or shared anywhere. And so one of the things I think I shared in the presentation was, our approach to building a secrets management program so we don't have this problem in the first place. Of course, we have to fix all that external stuff, right, that they got initial access from, but also we really wanted to focus on that. So we segmented our secrets management program into 4 segments: detect, prevent, respond, and educate. And so in the detect part, basically this is, stop the bleeding, which was, when developers or anybody using a chat system or something like that manages to commit code or share a password, we can detect it. So for code, we did this via, pre-commit hooks. Actually, this is in the prevention phase. And in detect, we scanned all of our repos with open source tools like Get Secrets and stuff like that to root all of that out. And then none of that matters. Detect and prevent don't matter unless you have a way to respond, which for us was a vaulting technology, right, with automatic credential rotation. And then we had to educate every developer, every IT admin in the whole organization on why you don't do this in the first place, why we have put in these prevention methods and these detection methods. And we had to go out and like kind of a PR tour to talk about secrets management inside of the organization. And that whole program was 3 people who did a majority of that work for a huge organization, but then worked with other development teams. And it was one of the best things I ever did at Ubisoft, was built that secrets management team. There's a couple teams I built there that were pretty forward facing, and that team was pretty cool. So that was for the secrets. Then we did some research and we were like, okay, so if somehow a secret gets out that causes issues, or like an API key or a certificate, any kind of secret, if it gets out, normally the ones that were from the survey and me talking to all these CISOs and reading all these post-breach notifications, when I looked at those, it usually turned out to be some kind of web technology. And a lot of times they were just using, a Microsoft O365 like credential or something like that. And so what we had to do is actually shorten the cookie length for your Microsoft account to 24 hours. And how we came up with 24 hours was that was basically it takes the attacker about 24 hours to steal something from malware, put it on sale and sell it, and then someone to use it. So if we're rotating your session and the cookie is invalid within 24 hours, then by the time it gets there, it's already invalidated. But what this means is that your users have to log in every day, which was not very popular to our users, right? It's not very user-centric. Everybody just wanted it, your Microsoft session to last forever, right? And this includes the whole suite. This includes you using PowerPoint, you using all this stuff, right? You had to log in every morning. But it saved our asses in a couple of like really, really big follow-up things that we dealt with. So so that was one of the ones that I think was a big part of the detection kind of strategy, or the prevention strategy as well.
Yeah, that's that whole balance of user experience versus security. It's always a pain, always has been. I mean, I remember trying to implement single sign-on back in, like, I don't know, crap, 2006 or something, 2000, something like that. And it just, we got it down. It was one of the first ones, and we got it down to a science. But we had one nurse manager that hated the way it was implemented, and she just blocked the whole thing. Or she was a VP. So she didn't like it. She thought it was going to make things more difficult, which it didn't. But yeah, when you have to balance that, it can cause the whole thing to go up in flames. It's unfortunate.
We did separate out the cookie kind of rotation policy. So it was 24 hours for your web browser, like on your PC or your laptop. But on the mobile ecosystems, we let it live a week longer because they were more protected from malware, usually, because nobody wants to burn an iOS 0 day or an Android 0 day just to phish one user, right? So we let the cookies live longer on the mobile devices, which actually had a lot of our executives travel with iPads or Android tablets, which is actually super cool, because the ecosystem there is a lot more secure than a desktop browser. So it actually did cause some like really weird cultural change in how people worked via mobile devices, and it actually turned out to be really nice. So yeah.
Man, that's a great use case study all the way around. It's fantastic presentation, man. I'm really glad. I wish we could keep talking about it, but we do have to shut this down. But everybody go look at Jason's talk. I mean, it also goes back to what we talked about in our last podcast, which was threat modeling. I mean, that whole issue with the knowing that the mobile devices are a little more secure, and you don't have to just have one policy for everything and make everybody even more mad having to type their password into their mobile device, because that's probably a little more secure. So that's good threat modeling as well. So any final words, Jason?
No, I'm just happy to see you guys have a chance to chat. And, hopefully I'm going to try to make it out to HOU.SEC.CON. I have a version of this presentation which is more executive focused on how to prioritize your security program and what you should spend money on. And hopefully I'm going to submit out there and see if I get accepted. So.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, we'd love to see that one. And you being a CISO, having that background, that's perfect. So
very cool.
All right, man. Well, thank you again for talking. Thank you again for being on here. Great to see you as always. Hopefully we can get you HOU.SEC.CON, get you to HOU.SEC.CON again.
Yep.
All the things.
I'll be back.
All right, sir. Sam, anything? Do you feel better since the last half?
I feel better than the first part. Yeah. So yeah, it's still bad, right? I mean, anyway, but yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Too funny. All right.
That's what bourbon's for.
Or tequila, maybe one of the two. Beer. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for joining us on episode 29 with Jason Haddix, and we will see you on episode, if you can believe it, 30, not too long from now. So thanks, everybody.